My name is Sean Galligan. I work for Yahoo. Joined the company about 2.5 years ago through the acquisition of another company called Flurry. Flurry was a company that was an early startup in the mobile application arena or industry. We provide an analytics solution to developers and advertising solution to both advertisers and publishers. Now at Yahoo, I lead a team that focuses on a few different industry verticals. So I have a team focused on technology, media and entertainment, and telecom. And we essentially just work with brands to help them engage consumers and build their brands in the online world. So I had an opportunity to meet with Dean Humbles about a year ago, and we had a great conversation. We talked about innovation and Purdue's place in the technology landscape, and talked about what we could do to build a bridge. So this was really exciting for me, for us to bring us all together here, because I think it was born out of a lot of different conversations that Dean Humbles had. And so thank you very much for acting upon that and bringing us all together. I hope it's the beginning of many events and activities that we engage in to talk about the future. Likewise, thank you guys for being here today. I know everybody's taking time out of the office, so certainly appreciate that. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you about IoT. I do think one of the interesting things about IoT to me is being involved in the mobile application ecosystem really early. It was an exciting time because there was really the emergence of a new platform that grew to be one of the most high growth and successful consumer ecosystems out there today. As I look at IoT, it has all the underpinnings of that as well. Every time I talk to developers, I always ask them, what are you developing for? What platform you're focused on? I mean, people are obsessed out here about what the next platform is. And while I don't know what company or what companies are going to certainly lead that, it's very clear that IoT is a really exciting area from a platform perspective. I just throw this up here as a baseline because there's certain perspectives on IoT, but I'll also kind of refer to this definition later because there's a really important point here that I think consumers are missing. But essentially, this is a way for us to connect to the internet among a lot of different devices, and as importantly, connect those devices to each other. So for the next several minutes, I'm going to focus on really the consumer perspective of IoT. And as the consumer develops their perception of IoT, the foundation of all different kinds of potential use cases are being built out, right? And the growth is explosive. As you look at this, you see all the different things that different industries are developing. We're likely to exceed more than 50 billion devices by 2020. So the growth is really explosive and exciting. And it's not just taking place in a few industries, right? This is very, growth is amazing, but it's also well distributed and diversified. And we can see that it's across a dozen plus different industries here. Virtually all of them are showing really impressive growth in their investment in IoT. The one notable exception is the one that's really at the top of the pack, and that's travel, transportation, and hospitality. But you kind of expect that, right? Because they're a leader, they're an early adopter, they got out in front early, so at some point they have to decelerate. But the investment is still huge. And it's funny, until I listened to Karthik's presentation earlier, I really didn't realize that the hotel minibar was the hub or the beginning launch pad of innovation in IoT. It sort of had an epiphany that my overindulgence or lack of restraint over these years actually allowed me to take place in innovation. So that was kind of a cool sort of thing for me to realize. You don't really expect that from your hotel minibar. So we're growing across a lot of different industries. And the growth is impressive and the investment is huge. But where does that really leave the consumer? Does the consumer really have an understanding of what this is? And so we began to ask a lot of these different questions. Are consumers familiar with the concept of IoT? What aspects are they really interested in? What IoT devices have they already adopted or plan to adopt? And what are the consideration factors in adopting those? And then what are the barriers? So we teamed up with Ipsos Connect to do a survey on consumers and their perception of and awareness of IoT. Surveyed about 1,500 US consumers. You can see on the left sort of the distribution and timing of this, as well as a little bit of the profile of the user, and then all the different types of devices that were sort of considered, brought into the questioning around IoT. What we found was really interesting. The respondents were interviewed about their IoT awareness, their interest, and ownership, as well as just their overall attitude in taking part in technology ecosystems. And they were grouped into 4 main segments. The first one are super techies. These are folks that they're enthusiasts for all things technology, right? They use the Internet of Things, they're involved in tech, they own a lot of different devices and love technology. Second segment are those that are cautious, they're laggards, open to tech, they use it a lot, but they're cautious and worried, and sometimes slow to kind of adopt or react and purchase. And then third bucket, technophobes. These are people that just, they're terrified. Technology makes them nervous. They only use it really when they have to. And then the fourth segment, those that are kind of unengaged or pragmatists. They're not particularly heavily engaged in any amount of tech they own, and they use it sort of sparingly. So let's start off by, as we think about these 4 different segments, let's start off and look at familiarity and interests of actual IoT devices themselves. So as you look at the consumers that we surveyed, only 60% of them were actually familiar with the concept of the Internet of Things. Not surprisingly, the familiarity is highest among teens and millennials. But what was really interesting, and certainly a little bit higher among males overall, what was really interesting is that 28% of those that are familiar with the concept are really not familiar with the term Internet of Things. Another key takeaway from Karthik's presentation is that we've got a branding problem here, right? People don't understand or aren't aware of that brand of Internet of Things, which is kind of ironic given that it was invented with Procter & Gamble as a presentation, which probably is the leader in branding. These are the goofy things that I think about, but I found that very interesting. So the next piece is just around the familiarity of IoT a little bit further. 36% were not familiar with the concept, not the brand, not the term, but the concept of Internet of Things at all. And that lack of familiarity was really highest among boomers, Gen Xers, and females. So as you look at familiarity of devices themselves, now look at ownership, right? So this is kind of ironic in some ways and sort of logical in others, that only 60% of people are familiar with these devices, but 70% of them actually have them, which is certainly very interesting. If you look down here to the left, you're either heavily engaged or not engaged at all, and as you look to the right, you can certainly see that on average, all of us own about 2+ devices, with sort of the teens and millennials leading the pack. That's in teens and millennials' relentless pursuit to embarrass baby boomers on their adoption of all things tech. It's 3x time what you see a boomer versus a millennial. So we talked about ownership. Now we look at actual own versus interest. So blue is I own, green is I'm interested. And so you can certainly see that entertainment devices and cloud storage devices are highest in ownership, but there is really significant interest in devices, so outside ownership, really high interest in devices that are more like smart appliances, dealing with automation or security. So aside from the interest that we talked about here, there still is a really, I'd say, high interest level in learning more, right? So 41% are either very or extremely interested in learning more about IoT. And their primary sort of focus areas really, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, really focus on pricing, the benefits, or what we call applications or use cases, and then security and safety. This just gives you a little bit of a complexion around the profile. So They are more like the folks that are more likely to be interested in IoT devices tend to be on the younger side, tend to be male, Hispanic, and tend to be a little more wealthy. 2 in 5 are super techies, and 1 in 3 are sort of falling in that bucket of unengaged or pragmatists. So we take the next step here to purchase intent, and despite the high interest for less adopted IoT devices, purchase intent in the short term continues to be highest among those entertainment and cloud storage devices that ironically already have high ownership. But I'd say overall, as you look across all these different devices, you have certainly high numbers in terms of interest level. So let's talk a little bit about barriers to purchase or barriers to entry for the consumer. These are sort of the big 3 drivers of adoption that we've observed through this survey. So first case is certainly the entertainment use case. And this is primarily driven around gaming consoles, smart TVs, streaming devices, and it's really around consumers just having fun with content. The second group or the second driver is those, and this falls really more around wearables and appliances, but they're looking at it from a convenience and utility perspective. And then the third piece, which really centers around smart automation and security, this is right now we're finding more novelty driven. So those are kind of the 3 big drivers that we observed in the survey. Let's talk a little bit about the barriers. There's certainly a lot of excitement for IoT devices, but we've got 2 what we feel really big barriers. So lack of need and cost, and privacy and security concerns are 2 of the biggest barriers. I think these are certainly addressable as we build awareness. Certainly from a cost perspective, as you look back at that first graph and the different companies that are making investments in IoT, you expect a ton of competition to follow, and so I think that drives down price and addresses the cost issue. But that lack of need piece is still really a pretty big issue. And I think what we've yet to define is, or yet to build is the brand of IoT, but also just those few killer use cases for the consumer that helps them sort of frame their mind around the concept and what the benefits are of using these devices. And I think you're seeing early signs of this. Certainly, Amazon's success through the holiday period with Echo and Dot was massive. I think they grew by almost 10x in a very short period of time. So certainly there's growing adoption here, and I think that's going to continue. You're seeing Google following with their home device and getting a ton of traction there as well. So even though we've got, I think, some good momentum brewing here, we also have some concerns around privacy and security. And I think a couple people mentioned that earlier today. These are very real. We've all read stories about these different things. Certainly my company's been involved, unfortunately, in some of these stories. But I think it's pervasive. It's going to affect all different kinds of people over time. And it's funny. I had a conversation with my 9-year-old daughter this morning. I try and brainwash her and her sister all the time about pursuing a career in STEM and going to Purdue. And so I explained to the 9-year-old that, hey, I'm going to meet with a bunch of Purdue folks today, and I'm really excited about it, and we're going to talk about the Internet of Things. And she was like, okay, what is that? What are you talking about? And so I kind of pointed to our Echo, which I'm a huge fan of, great product. And I explained to her that, this is, sort of, your gateway or the platform of how you engage in the Internet of Things as a consumer and as you at home. And she kind of thought for a second, and she said, Daddy, I think Alexa's stalking us. I was like, okay, why do you think that? And then she did not hesitate, and she said, Alexa, are you listening to us right now? There was a brief pause, and Alexa responded, I only share audio with Amazon when you use the wake word. And, it was, I was surprised how big of a smart aleck my daughter was, and that she could immediately turn into conversation into Alexa. But B, it's very clear that a 9-year-old is worried about security. Amazon's very conscious about security. They have a response ready right away. But this will continue to be sort of a big barrier for us. No doubt I think we get around it. We've certainly got around other security and privacy concerns, and we'll continue to have to get around those. But they remain a big barrier. And it's not just 9-year-olds, right? I have another friend of mine who is senior executive in a marketing firm, works here in Silicon Valley, very tech forward, bought an Android home device, was really excited about it, but eventually became a little concerned about what was being listened to and what was being recorded and what was being shared. So you've got both ends of the spectrum, right? A 9-year-old and a 40-something tech executive, both of which I think are very, very concerned about issues that we need to solve. So I think this is interesting from our perspective. When you look at big, scary concerns like privacy and security, trust really becomes an issue. And a strong brand typically, if it's been built successfully, conveys trust. So I think this data affirms that the role of brand and how important it is in making that purchase is a really big determinant in how someone adopts these devices. And quite frankly, I think how safe they feel with these devices. So this is, I'll kind of go back to the first slide when we talked about the definition of IoT. And this is something I find really, really interesting. And quite frankly, I view this as the opportunity. If you think back to the definition, right, it's devices connected, both to the internet and to each other. But when we look at the respondents that we surveyed, half of them, or almost half of them, are completely unaware of the fact that these devices can be connected to each other. And to me, that's at least half of the value proposition, if not more. So I think we have a long way to go into building the brand itself, but also building awareness around what these devices can do, how they can deliver value for consumers. And I think as we're able to do that, you're going to see more and more adoption and see adoption accelerate. So I won't go through all these different summary of findings, but clearly, getting consumers more familiar with IoT is key. Going beyond just plain entertainment, right? When I think about conversations that I have with some of my friends, what's your favorite use case of your Google Home or your Amazon Echo? It's almost always they want to turn music on right away, right? And then the second one is, I just like the timer. It's great in the kitchen. So while that's a utility, it's not really compelling enough for us to say we've got a number of different use cases beyond entertainment. So I think certainly we've got a little bit of ways to go here, but we have to break through than just entertainment. And then certainly, consumer interest profiles are really important. The importance of branding, critical. But most importantly, I think getting through some of these these concerns around security and privacy, and just reinforcing how important and how high impact some of these use cases can have. Those are the key things that are going to be able to drive adoption for us. So that's all I had. I don't know how we are on time. We got exactly 1 minute left. Happy to take questions if anyone has anyone. If not, yep, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I can't, so question was, have there been any advancements, solutions, or are we addressing some of these security concerns? I can't answer from a from a product or engineering standpoint. I'm looking at this through the lens of a consumer. I think, I have to imagine that there's lots of folks at these companies that are heavily engaged in filling some of these gaps on the security perspective. The key thing is really around conveying the safety of this to the consumer, because we can patch all the security holes that we find, but if the consumer still perceives this to be, an infringement, a threat, a worry, then we're not going to get adoption of the devices like we need it. So I certainly feel like we can. It's a matter of educating and building awareness. And, you know, I'm a believer in technology. I think we can solve security and privacy problems pretty easily, but we got to communicate it properly to consumers. Any other questions? Yes?
Well, do you think you would have gotten different results if you just called it the internet instead of the Internet of Things?
Yeah, although you might have confused people.
No, I mean, you know, like, people are used to the internet. They
Yeah.
expect their phones to be connected. They don't, like, to then have them have to take that extra step of, oh, that's a thing, rather than, right? I mean, is it possible that we're just scaring them by making them think something new that they're already actually participating in?
Could be, but I think the thing that I worry about, at the risk of being redundant, is that if you were to just focus on the internet, then you would sort of underscore the problem that I highlighted, is that really the gap is that they're unaware of the fact that these devices can not only connect to the internet, they can actually connect to them, you know, to each other. And that is where I think the real value is. We could have done a better job branding it, and as an industry or participants in all these industries, I think we will over time. I think the voice platform is where your average consumer is going to be able to wrap their head around this. It kind of is reminiscent of search to them, and they can understand that search is a mechanism of how I discover things or content or whatever. As these voice platforms get better and better and get more widely distributed and developers develop applications for them, I think you'll see consumers get a better understanding around, oh, this actually will have a massive impact on my life and is going to change the way I live.
It's also what they see in science fiction.
Exactly, yeah. Which we oftentimes, you know, kind of emulate that. Great, well, thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.